Welcome to another gathering on this 27th of March, 2022. When you hear about wars and rumors of wars, what do you think most people think of doing? Adding a few more things to their pantry, contacting their family, enlisting for war, moving away, or getting involved in politics? I'm not really sure, but as Christians, as we hear wars and rumors of wars, we often think of the end times. In part because of texts like Mark 13, where in verse 7 it says exactly that. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, don't be alarmed. But then it goes on to say other things about needing the gospel to be preached everywhere. And then it kind of closes up in verse 24, not closes, but brings us to the sense that crazy things are going to happen in the sky. The sun's not going to be seen. The moon's not going to be seen. Stars are falling. And then the Son of Man comes on clouds with great power and glory. And we go, yep, it's about the end times. But is that really what Mark 13 is about? The end times? And I want to argue with you, not exactly. Mark 13, if you're reading along, actually is the end interaction of Jesus with the leading rulers of Jerusalem and the temple. He's walked into Jerusalem and the temple in Mark 11 as part of Palm Sunday. And then he has all these dialogues around the temple and our interaction with it. And as they're leaving, the disciples go, look at these stones of the temple, aren't they magnificent? And Jesus says, nah, they're going to get knocked over. Every stone's going to be thrown down, which is super significant. It's like when Osama bin Laden ran planes into the World Trade Center. He's saying, I'm going to try to undo your economic system. Or if Russia invaded New Zealand and started to take apart the beehive and waved the Russian flag, you'd say, oh my gosh, this is so significant. The world is changing for us. And that's what the disciples would have heard. So what is Mark 13 about? Well, I think the question of the disciples and Jesus' answer is really what he's trying to get after. Because if you want to know, during the historical time period between Jesus' life, death, resurrection, and when Mark is written, there's a lot of tense things going on in Judea with Rome. And there's all these revolts. And in 70 AD, the temple is destroyed. And Jesus knows what's coming and lets them know, look, in my ministry and what I'm doing, I'm telling you, life is going to shift, and the way that you think about how to relate to God is going to shift. That's what he's been saying all along. And Mark 13 is spelling that out in relation to the temple. So here's a couple markers for you to look out for and to understand what Jesus is saying. One, the question at the beginning of chapter 13. What about these stones? And Jesus says, let me explain. And in that, he explains a couple of different pieces about what's happening. There's challenges, there's wars, there's rumors of wars, there's people getting thrown into having to talk before rulers. But then there's this abomination of desolation, which is where people who are not Jews bring something into the temple in some way, shape, or form and really defile how the temple is supposed to be worshiping of God. And so that happens. And at that point, everybody in Judea is supposed to flee and get away because this is really bad. And then in verse 24, the confusing part is all these signs are going on about the stars and the sun and the moon. And then we see Jesus, the Son of Man, coming in clouds with great power. And we think he's coming down to earth. But again, if we remember that Mark is both clear and complex, he's going back to Daniel 7, 13 and 14, where the Son of Man is recognized in the heavens for having ultimate authority. So Mark is telling us that Jesus recognizes himself as that. And when Jerusalem and the temple falls, he will be vindicated for saying what he's saying. Now, that then gets wrapped up in verse 28 to 31, where he says it in more plain language. Like, when you see all these things, then you know in this generation all this is going to happen. You will see this. And then he flips into verse 32 and says, but the day and hour, not even the angels or me, the Son, knows about when the ultimate time of God's judgment comes. So what does all this mean? Well, as we know, Jesus has continually been saying, if you want to meet God, you don't meet him in the temple, you meet him with me. And so he's going to put an end to the old covenant system, and in his life, death, and resurrection, his body and blood given, he's going to reimagine how people relate to God. No longer the old covenant, but a new covenant. And that we know everybody is welcome, because after Jesus is recognized, people are going to the four ends of the world to grab disciples. That is significant. If that's the case, he says, I don't even know when the end is coming. So Jerusalem and the temple fall helps everybody know that I'm truly the king, as I said. But I don't know when the end is. So what do we do with that? We realize that in Mark 13, there is encouragement to watch, to witness, to endure suffering in order to testify to the goodness of Jesus, to his welcome, to his presence, to his love, to engagement of him one-on-one as nations and tribes and tongues. Everyone is welcome. So Mark 13 is helping us understand, in history, when the temple falls, know that all that I've said about meeting God in me is true. And you as believers are to watch, to witness, and to endure. So settle into this world and get involved. And don't always be looking for God's coming immediately to take us out of it, but really to invest ourselves in it. And when we do that, that's our attentiveness. That's how we watch, is being ready to share Jesus whenever and wherever we are. That's it. Enjoy your discussion and the text, and I'm looking forward to hearing how you go from there.